Welcome back to WristFind. Today we have a heavily requested video. This is the unboxing of the Casio AE1200WH, otherwise known as the Casio Royale. And with me here, I have a few other popular Casio models like the Casio Duro and the Casio F91W. These will give us a good frame of reference when comparing to the Casio Royale. So without further ado, let's get right into it. At this point, I'm really running out of space for these Casio boxes. Not much to speak of here. It's the same box that almost every Casio comes in, at least all the Casios that I've gotten from Amazon. Which, by the way, I was able to get this watch on Amazon for an absolute steal. I think it was just over $19. So I'll leave the Amazon link down below if you want to take a look. All right, let's pull this lid off and get our first look at the watch. It, of course, comes with Casio's classic little plastic stand and the little plastic hostage hood on top. All right, so there's our first good look at the Casio Royale. There's a big green tag on the side boasting a 10-year battery life, which I absolutely believe. And down on the lower tag, it again boasts that 10-year battery life, the world time with 48 cities, 5 alarms, and 100 meters of water resistance. I actually didn't know that this watch had 100 meters of water resistance, so that's the first nice surprise of this. All right, let's do the satisfying plastic pull. And now we can get a really good look at the face of the Royale. All right, let's pop her off the stand. All right, before we get too far into this, I don't want to forget, today's wrist check, I'm wearing the vintage Seiko 5. Let me know down in the comments what watch you're wearing right now. All right, so this watch pretty much speaks for itself. It's got quite the look to it. The first thing I notice is that it's not quite as heavy as I expected. I don't know why, just looking at this watch in videos and seeing pictures of it, it seems like it would be quite a chunky, hefty piece. But it's honestly not too bad. It's definitely significantly lighter than the Casio Duro. But the overall size and presence of the watch does feel very similar. So let's get a few quick dimensions to see what we're working with. Okay, so the first dimension is case width without the buttons included, and it's just around 40 millimeters. Now, when you do include the buttons, it's a little bit closer to 45 millimeters. So that's just something to keep in mind. I don't think it necessarily looks or feels like a 45 millimeter watch, but it definitely is a bit wide when you measure it from its furthest components. Lug to lug is tricky to get a perfect measurement on because of the rubber strap, but I'm getting somewhere around 46 millimeters, even though they advertise it, I believe, as 45 millimeters. And then I think one of the most important measurements on this watch is the case thickness, which is coming in at just under 13 millimeters. So it's a big watch, and there's definitely no getting around that fact. But again, it's not huge. I'm really curious to put this on my wrist and see how it actually feels, but for some reason, it does feel a bit smaller and not quite as bulky or chunky as I expected for some reason. Okay, we won't get into all the features here. We'll save that for a future video, but I do want to explore some of the basic ones. So the first one is the time zone function. Obviously, a prominent part of this watch is the mini world map up in the top right corner. And I believe this search button on the bottom right is what cycles through those time zones. So you can see when I press this button, not only is the time changing on the bottom and the time zone being reflected in these 3-letter codes, but you can also see that small world map lighting up in the region that you're in. So that's a really cool, unique part of the Casio Royale. We have the mode button on the bottom left, which I'm assuming, like most Casios, cycles through all the different functions of the watch. So you got your alarm and your stopwatch in here. All right, the next big feature we have to look at is the backlight, or the illuminator. So let's go ahead and switch off some lights and see how this light looks. All right, there's our first good look at the backlight. So this is obviously a very bright orange glow. And it's funny, it doesn't seem to stay on if you continuously hold the button. It looks like it has a 1 to 2 second timer on it, regardless of how long you're pressing it. It's kind of an interesting feature decision. I wonder why they came up with that. It's very different than something like the Casio A1200WH, where you can just hold down the backlight for as long as you want. It might be a battery thing. They do push the 10-year battery quite a bit on the Casio Royale. So maybe this backlight timer is just a way to ensure that the battery actually lasts that long. But either way, the backlight is definitely good. We're not in complete darkness here. I still have a small studio light on, but you can see that this bright orange glow has plenty of legibility to it, as compared to something like the Casio A158, which has that infamous weak green backlight. I still love this watch, but the backlight has nothing on the Casio Royale. Okay, and finally, let's take a look at this watch on the wrist. There's not much to say about the band of this watch. It's Casio's classic rubber strap, just like on the Casio Duro. It's super durable, it looks good, and it really fits the aesthetic of this watch. Now, I have what I would classify as medium-sized wrists. I have about a 6.5-inch wrist, so this watch might look a little bit big on me. So yeah, it's a big watch. For some people, this might not be an issue at all. For me personally, this is definitely a little bit larger than what I typically wear. Now again, I do have the Casio Duro, which is technically a bigger watch when you're not measuring with the extra buttons on the Casio Royale. So I don't personally mind a larger watch from time to time, especially if it's something like a diver watch. But the Royale for me personally is definitely a bit big. I do think the biggest redeeming quality about this watch for me is gonna be the water resistance. The Casio Duro is usually my go-to watch whenever I'm swimming, and even though this watch only has 100 meters of water resistance as compared to the Duro's 200 meters, I might still consider swimming with this watch just because I know it's really durable and is probably able to handle more than what it's rated for. That's not a recommendation to go diving with your Casio Royale. I can't promise that it'll survive, but for me, that might end up being one of its functions in addition to a travel watch. It is really cool to be able to instantly shift back and forth between a bunch of different time zones. So let's say you're flying across the world and you have a layover in one city before you land in your final destination. If you were wearing a more traditional watch like a Duro or a Seiko, and you wanted to be able to easily cycle through the time zones of the cities that you're in, it would be a lot more of a hassle than just pressing a quick button on the side of the watch. Let me know what you think of this watch down in the comments. Do you have a Royale? Are you thinking of purchasing one? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Let me know your thoughts down below, and let me know if there are any other watches you want me to review in future videos. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with all things watch collecting. And if you want to see my full video and breakdown of the Casio Duro, watch this right here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.